live streamed.
Okay. No, I don't think so. Oh, can anybody see us? Oh, hey, we're live. Oh, Michele, they can hear us. Okay.
Yay! Yay!
Oh my goodness. Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry for no theme song. Sorry for no Delta CX background. Sorry for all the nothings. Welcome, low ego action heroes. So, whenever Michele joins us in my usual vMix tool, for some reason her broadcast is really choppy, and we didn't want that to happen again. So, I figured she would just join us via Zoom so we could actually see her in all of her loveliness. And that means not being in my usual broadcasting tool. But that being said, I am trying to monitor the chat room. Yep, the chat room's already saying hello, hello, Barbara, Rupi, John, Salam, Inaki. People are here. So, let me start with my usual opening spiel. Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. Check us out, costs you nothing. And today is a micro lesson in UX research note taking strategies, which, of course, our always special guest, Michele Ronsen. She's going to be back, I think, in a week or so for another show, and I will work my butt off to figure this thing out over the weekend. I will make my poor boyfriend join me on fake live streams until we have this figured out. So Michele is going to be doing a micro lesson today, which means I'm just going to do minimal talking and throw her some softball questions. And Michele, since you can't see the chat rooms, if anybody has a question from the chat room, I'll read it out. Because we're not in my vMix system, I can't put up the usual questions on the screen. If people put up emojis, they're not going to show up. So I apologize that people who love the usual interactivity of the show, it's not going to be here. And I've got my Zoom green screen going, which means you can see the green screen behind me. Oh, it's all bad. Okay, Michele, first introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michele Ronsen, and I am a user researcher and educator in the field. I live in San Francisco, and I'm the founder of Curiosity Tank and the Ask Like a Pro user research workshop series. It's great to be back.
Yes, always good to have you here. Check out Michele at curiositytank.com. You can also follow her on LinkedIn. Remember, Michele has one L, so that's MiCheleRonsen. So check her out there. And because this show is finally live, if anybody has any questions, I am monitoring the LinkedIn chat and the YouTube chat. And so let's just jump in. Michele, I don't even know what you've prepared for us today, but note-taking strategy. So go, go, go.
Great. So first, let's do a little overview about what is note-taking and why you would want to do it. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm referring to note-taking in terms of documenting what your user research or research, could be CX research, could be any type of research, what your participants, but particularly in UX, see, feel, say, and do. And we take notes because it's completely impossible to remember the individual details after each session, and they all start to blur together session after session. So what you see, what your team members see, they can also be very different. And note-taking is a great way to pull your team together into the fold. It's a great way to harness what I refer to as their beautiful minds, right? And we can learn so much more from the diversity of more than one person taking notes. And this inclusion will also help you and your team digest the information and see it visually. And there's many different ways to take notes. There's many different kind of do's and don'ts that I'm going to walk you through. There's also some etiquette about taking notes. But if possible, you should always include your team wherever possible. let me pause there and see what kind of questions you guys have, if any, before I kind of dive into the meat. And then I'm going to show you several examples of different note-taking frameworks and setups. Oh, Debbie, I can't hear you.
I muted just in case my dog started barking. Sorry. Yes. So I was saying that can everybody see us and hear us, or do they only see? Can tell us what you can do. Can you see us and hear us? Someone said I can't see you. Anyway, just in case, let's see. Barbara says note taking with empathy mapping makes a lot of sense to distinguish the interview between each other. So that's a comment from the chat room. We don't have any questions yet. So I would say, at least I know they can hear us. Hopefully they can see us. And please continue, Michelle. I'll interrupt if there's a good question.
Great, great. So let's talk about some note-taking do's and don'ts. Well, first of all, you do not and you should not be capturing everything word for word. In fact, there are so many benefits to not taking notes verbatim. For instance, it's going to save you time from having to document or transcribe the notes. It's going to save you money from not having to document or transcribe those notes. And it's also going to expedite synthesis by allowing teams to plot and group notes immediately after each session and simultaneously during the sessions. Now, if you do capture everything verbatim, you may likely be the only note taker. Hey, we've all been there, right? So consider a transcription service instead. Some popular transcription services are Reduct, Rev, Temi. If you don't have a budget, you can go with something like YouTube and upload your, or even Siri or voice recordings or things like that. You can upload your audio or video file to YouTube and it will transcribe it. Just make sure you're putting it into a private channel and not making this live. But definitely consider a transcription service. This will allow you to focus 100% on the actual session. And it will help ensure that you're not missing important nonverbal information and other information like facial expressions, right? That's nonverbal, but other things. The simple fact of introducing note-taking during your earlier years will likely reduce your ability to actually gather the best and most pertinent information as quickly and as easily as if you compared to if you were 100% focused. You're gonna lose out on that.
Can I jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much. So a couple of things to mention, additional note transcription services. I'm a paid user of Otter. None of these are sponsored. Hashtag not sponsored. I cannot roll out my graphic. Hashtag not sponsored for all of these. And we've also been using Dovetail a bit around Delta CX, also hashtag not sponsored. And we have a question from LinkedIn. Elizabeth Hitchens, who I've only known for like a million years, says, do you anonymize notes automatically? I do this, but I wonder if I am insane. So I'm thinking she means, Liz, what do you mean? But I'm thinking she means maybe as she takes notes, she says like P1 and gender neutral pronouns and like doesn't include names. So how do you approach making your notes more anonymous for the participant?
I'm going to actually get to that a little bit later, but to answer your question now, I tried to anonymize them in the note-taking document by using P1 for participant 1, P2 for participant 2, and so forth. Sometimes when I'm setting up my sheet, though, and I'll give you an example of those sheets, I will use the first name along with the P number, and then strip out the first name after the sessions are done.
Great, thanks. We have another question. And again, if you're going to answer this later, let us know. Barbara asks, is it useful to create sort of templates for observers to take notes without judging themselves? Is that a good practice?
Excellent practice. Yes. And I'm going to show you what those look like. Absolutely.
If you're going to show us, you're going to have to share your screen. Good thing we're in Zoom.
Yes. Couple of things I do want to point out and why you might leave the first name. I just wrapped up a study last week. I interviewed 10 people. 3 of them had the first name Chris. So 3 of them were all founders of a small business company. 3 of them were all in the same region. And 3 of them, so there are methods to the madness why you might want to include some information, at least until you conduct the sessions and then you anonymize it. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Okay, go ahead. Those are the questions. Thanks.
Great. Okay, some other note-taking do's and don'ts. We were talking about capturing everything verbatim. So my suggestion is you don't capture everything verbatim. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. You'll miss more important and verbal cues. And more importantly, if you're in the first few years of your career, you should not be taking notes live anyway. Just step away from the machine so you can be fully present and use either a transcription service to transcribe your audio or video files and then take notes from those. Or go back and rewatch the audio or video recordings. The number one reason for this is because you don't want to miss that important nonverbal or other pertinent information. If you do take notes verbatim, you will find yourself with required rework to have to strip out that the meaningful utterances and the quotes and remove all of the fluff, right? There are times where you may benefit from taking notes verbatim, though. For example, if you're just starting out or you're unfamiliar with the topic. So just some considerations. Note-taking should also be inclusive too. To the person who asked the question about note-taking templates for other team members, yes, I'm a huge fan. If possible, you always want to include your team for so many reasons. A, it's great to bring the team together, right? Everyone gains from different perspectives, and this makes the synthesis more meaningful and easier. It's an easy way to introduce people who are new to user research and increase the understanding for the people who are not yet clear on its purpose or its value. Additional note takers will also allow the moderator to be completely present and to focus on the participant, which is what we totally want, and really pay attention and identify those nonverbal communications and behaviors, right? Note takers should always participate in at least 2 sessions. And the reason for this is we want to ensure they grasp the different participants' perspectives. If they see just one session and the session is from Sandy and Sandy loved everything, then their whole perspective on this session will be Sandy loved everything, right? So if possible, and they can only attend 2 sessions, try to make those 2 sessions as diverse as you can. Maybe a new user with an existing user, or maybe a very advanced user versus or someone with like admin controls, or someone who is new to the platform, right? Maybe it's Nux, maybe it's Pux, maybe it's tenured versus not, maybe it's, we'll talk about some frameworks, but things like that would be helpful. There's likely going to be an instance when you are without other note takers. It just happens, right? When you're in this instance, I strongly suggest you take notes from your video recordings after the sessions, okay? When you're taking notes with your team, I have some must-haves, right? To go to the question earlier, should you have a clear template? Yes. Not only should you have a very clear and consistent template, you need to agree with those note takers on your note-taking strategy. You need to agree on how you're going to name each participant so it's consistent. You're going to need to separate also interpretations from observations, right? And also add timestamps. You're always going to want to start your timestamp at 0:00. If your session begins at 9:30, like this one did, then your timestamps are always going to be off, right? If you timestamp them as 0.037 for 7 minutes in, or 0.042 for 12 minutes in, you're going to have to do this mental gymnastics every single time. So always use your timestamps to start at 00, not the clock or not the time the session begins. Some other tips are to pilot the note-taking approach before your first session. Always take notes individually to avoid groupthink, and debrief immediately after each session. And regardless of how many note takers you have, you'll still want to record all of the sessions regardless.
Can I jump in with a question?
Yep.
Great, thanks. Super friend of the show, Kayleen, says, how do you balance staying present and also noting things you need to circle back to? If I don't note something, I'll forget to ask about it, but notes require context and then the note takes too long.
So what works for me is to do this in Google Sheets, and I'll show you, and I have like a special color-coded system. So it allows
Can't
me
wait to see it.
color the note. Yeah.
Cool.
Continue here. So there's also different ways to take notes. So when I talk about having a very clear and agreed upon note-taking strategy, I mean, you want to choose your dimensions before your session starts. So for example, are you going to take notes chronologically, like in order that the study took place? Question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, question 5. Are you maybe going to take notes according to topic, right? Maybe it's according to participant, or by task, or by purpose, or key research question. And what depth are you going to take the notes on, right? Are these going to be verbatim? Is it going to be shorthand, quotes, phrases, utterances, right? And what method are you going to use? Are they digital spreadsheets? Are they handwritten? Are they printed on a guide? Or is it Post-it notes? If it's Post-it notes, are they real Post-it notes? Are they digital Post-it notes, right? So we want to think these things through, make sure our whole team is on the same page. Also, the timing. I've talked about the timing a few times. Are you taking notes live during your session? Do not recommend that in your first couple of years in user research, or
Agreed.
from recordings or transcriptions. And then you might go so far as to indicate on those Post-it notes or in your shorthand, positive, negative remarks, follow-up, analytics, ahas, things to revisit, and so forth. And then again, clearly identify who on the team is responsible for taking notes. Ideally, everyone.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so at my current new job, we were talking today about the idea of trying to bring more product managers and product owners to watch future sessions. And it sounds like it would be good to have them do taking notes as well. Just in case the product managers tend to be a little bit biased or want to rush to interpretations, what strategies can we use to teach them to be extremely neutral, to only note the facts and not to say, I think people need this, or, to rush to any conclusions or solutions? And what do we tell them to help them remember that they're just the facts, ma'am?
Tell them, do not take notes to find solutions. Instead, to let the insights emerge from the data. Do not take notes on solutions. That's just not the role. The role while taking notes is to identify what happened.
Okay,
right?
so you said write what you see, write what you hear, write what people say they think, and write what people say they feel, but don't write solutions, conclusions, interpretations. I think this. Yes, okay. Not allowed. And I assume, and I might be jumping to the end here because we didn't plan this. I'm assuming that when you get to some of that synthesis, if somebody has put that in your notes, we move it off to the side because we don't want to consider interpretations, conclusions, solutions.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I have a video that I share in the Ask Like a Pro Orchestrate series that I thought would be really helpful. Debbie, can you give me a time check here? How much longer do we have?
Yeah, we did start a little bit late. So if we stop at our usual time, if you have a hard stop, then we have a half hour. If we can go a little bit late because we started a little bit late, then we could do probably 40 minutes.
Okay, let me see if I have my audio turned on here.
Remember, when you do share your screen in Zoom, you have to check the box that says share sound.
Okay.
Otherwise, we can always post a link to the video if it's on YouTube and available to the public.
It is not.
Not. It is unlisted and mysterious. or private or something. Okay. Aha, we're seeing your screen. Google
Okay.
Drive.
Here we go.
Let me see if I'll tell you if I can hear it.
Hi,
we can hear
everyone.
it.
Here's an example of how I set up my note-taking in a whole bunch of different ways. The first thing that you're going to see here is a Google Sheet. And I have my guide listed in column B, and it is organized according to the same sections and callouts and timestamps that are listed in the discussion guide. So at first I have the name of my study, the dates, the type of methodology, and the goals. This is just if someone on the team digs it up later, they have some context. This is my introduction. I have an alternative for a remote study versus an in-person study. I have my callouts here to make sure I get the NDA signed and to start the recording. I have my light introduction, my timestamp, as I mentioned, and then I'm going to jump in. I'm going to go into my background. I have my timestamp, and then I'm going to talk about onboarding, and the bulk of this study is focused on the onboarding experience of this particular product. I have information and callouts for things that are very important to really drill down on. And I also have specific screens. So I should be on this screen when I am talking about that, or I should be on this screen, or I should be on that screen, right? So I have very, very detailed approach, and it's all laid out. I know that this information is extremely important, so I cannot miss that. If in the chance that I'm pressed for time, I know exactly where to spend my energy, and I know exactly what I can skip. So you can see this goes down and down and down. Now, in this top column right here, you'll see one row for each of my participants. And they're labeled P1, P2, P3, etc. with their name. And then their name will be taken out of the document when we finish for privacy's sake. Now, why this is so helpful is, let me see if I can really zoom out here and I can show you how easy it is to extract information that has to do with one particular pain point or one particular topic. And what I've also done here is I've color-coded it in real time. I don't remember what the codes meant for this particular study, but let's just say that blue was something I wanted to follow up on, yellow was a repetitive theme, red was a major pain point or emotional aspect. You can see how easy it is to cut across and look across my whole study by organizing my notes in this way. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my entire recruiting grid together in one place. So what we have here, let me see if I can zoom in again. In the left-hand column is the date, the name of the person, the participant, the time I'm meeting with them, whether the NDA was received or not. I have all their personal contact information here, which has just been removed for privacy purposes, city, and then from here over, over are their pertinent responses repurposed from their survey screener. So I have it all in one place. Okay. I'm also going to share this with my stakeholders so that they can begin to break the ice before we meet as well. On another tab, I have a super condensed snapshot of what is going to happen when. And on the last tab, I have just my protocol. So oftentimes I'll have just the protocol on one page, or this is the populated protocol where I started. Sorry, it must be on the first tab. Oftentimes I'll have just the protocol on one specific tab alone. So that's one way to set up a note-taking strategy from this was for a moderated interview. Here is an example of a different setup for a task-based usability study. And what you'll see on the first tab, if I can click there, I don't know why it's not clicking there. Let me, if I can go, no, it won't. Maybe I can pause. Sorry about that. I wasn't able to change the tab. So what you'll see here is actually how another researcher set up this study. Here are the tasks that we are looking into, and here is our color-coded grid. Okay, so we did this with new humans. This is the current users grid, and then we also did it with new humans. Okay, so this was her approach. It doesn't matter necessarily how detailed it is, as long as we are consistent in our legend and how we were coding things. So I picked up this study from her in the middle. She did the first segment. I did the second. Here are my color codes, and I just added in much, much more detail because, again, I was substantiating or backing up for her, and I wanted her to have all the information she needed. Across the top here are my individual participants, how they rated, or the legend, like how successful they were in completing that task, and any sort of notes. In this first column, similar to the last spreadsheet, I have the background, I have the topics, and then in column B, I have the scenarios and my probing questions. So if I zoom out here, you can also see easily this task was very difficult to achieve, right? So I can very quickly like zoom out and identify a key opportunity there. No one was able to achieve this task. On the other hand, this task was relatively successful from everyone who attempted it, right? So I'm using these color codes and this tagging system to help me expedite my analysis and synthesis. And here on this last sheet, I have a very quick summary to share. Opportunities, strengths, recommendations, and considerations. Here's another way that we often set up our note-taking strategies, and this is what's called a rainbow spreadsheet. And this is a study in which we're comparing a whole bunch of different form fields and functionalities and filters and capabilities for different Find a Doctor tools. All of this is public knowledge. This is just the actual comparison. But what we've done here is created a tab for each thing that we are comparing. And we have used this color coding system to help us understand who has what. So again, the color codes are very helpful to speeding up the analysis and synthesis. This is a tremendous amount of data. What this is helpful for, sometimes we just share the rainbow spreadsheet in itself, or we may repurpose it and put it into a deck with a little bit more context. And here is what that might look like, okay? So I have a section here called Find a Doctor Features and Functionality Comparison. And this might be easier for someone to digest in these sort of snippets, if you will. Now, other ways that we take notes include something as simple as a feedback grid. So what are we taking notes on? Perhaps we're taking notes on positive feedback, constructive criticism, new questions raised, new ideas generated. For the purposes of our Orchestrate class today, we're going to take some notes in these categories: new concepts, familiar concepts, things for my study, or thoughts for my study, and questions. Okay. Now, these simple feedback grids should be adapted to align with what you're trying to learn about your particular study. So this is just an example of how to use the grid. For the purposes of today's class, we're going to practice as they relate to note-taking. Now, everyone should have their own copy of this. We don't want to do group notes because that will introduce groupthink. Plus, what's new for you and familiar for you, or what you consider to be a new question raised or a new idea generated, will be different than for your other teammates. And again, this is where we want to harness all those brilliant minds. So we want every individual to have their own sheet. And then last but not least, this is a simple debrief template. And debriefing is really important to do after each session and after the sessions are complete. So what we want to do here in sum is identify the key themes. And again, these are individual to you, right? Your key themes might be different than somebody else's key themes. And that's where we want to get our beautiful minds together and learn from each other. You're going to give a description of those key themes, and a description that has enough context to make sense to someone who's not totally in the weeds on this particular study. And then some sort of evidence to support it, right? The evidence to support is really important to substantiate the credibility of whatever that theme is. And last but not least, some ideas for how to address it. So this is going to be another way that we are going to practice taking notes today. Okay.
Wow. Thank you so much for that great preview of your courses. And of course, if people want to check out your courses, curiositytank.com, #not sponsored. Michelle offered to pay me and I said no. So please go throw your money at her. We have a couple of comments in the chat room, but mostly it's nice. I like this. Corey Soros said, that's how I organize my research or usability tests. Spreadsheets are awesome. It's great to see others doing similar things. Thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome. Any questions about debrief grids? Or
yeah, I don't see any questions about that yet, but my question is, do you tend to collect everybody's notes and do your own analysis and synthesis? Do you tend to workshop analysis? You know, what are your preferences?
I think that's really going to vary according to the team, according to the culture, the availability, the importance of the study, relative to the decisions that we need to make. I've done it all sorts of ways where everyone takes notes simultaneously and then we debrief immediately after, like the 15 minutes after, which is super helpful to capture it in real time and understand how my teammates are thinking about things. We've also done it where we debrief at the end of the day. So say we have three sessions in a day, then we use the last half hour of the day to kind of organize our thoughts. In this last study, I had participants observing but not taking notes. And then at the end of the day, I sent a recap of each study and then simultaneously. So what is key is to make sure that the primary stakeholders are in the loop every single day, whether you're sharing what I refer to as research snacks along the way, is you want to continue to generate interest about the study, as well as buy-in, right? Buy-in for the credibility of the study, buy-in for, that trust that the study will produce the results. And you also, by sharing these sort of research snacks along the way and touching base consistently, what you're doing is, again, just ensuring that your team will be able to move from findings and insights, which are different, into action much more quickly, right? And the last thing you want to do is surprise your stakeholders at the end of a study and say, oh, this is what we found, or this is what we learned. And they're, like, what? They're gobsmacked. That's like the worst situation. So teamwork is key. Teamwork makes the dream work.
I hope so, because, not all of us have great team members, but you're certainly not speaking about my new job. Yeah. So, if, everybody, we've got some more time. If you have any questions for Michele about research note-taking strategies, please put them in the chat room. I am monitoring LinkedIn, YouTube, and tweets at Delta_CX. Michele, did you have more notes or content or thoughts for everybody?
I do. I have, I'll share something else with you. Is probably one of my favorite tools, and it's a frameworks tool that I developed to help people think about, let's see where it is here, to help people think about how they take notes and different aspects. Can you see that?
I do.
So frameworks can be about highs and lows, right? So for some examples, high tech to low tech, high impact to low impact, highlights to low lights, high effort, high cost, low costs, right? They could also be about sentiment. They could be about ins and outs, right? Inefficient versus effective. Ineffective versus effective, inefficient versus efficient, informed versus uninformed. Frequency can be another sort of range of frameworks, or goals, right? Quick wins versus long-term goals, top priority versus long-term priority, positives and negatives, advantages, disadvantages. So coming up with your frameworks in advance sometimes really helps to expedite your note-taking, and or user frameworks after your note-taking to help during your analysis and synthesis. And many times, so you can use frameworks on like an X axis, right? Like a linear axis. Well, what I like to do is use frameworks on an XY axis, where I'm plotting my information in 2x2s. So maybe what I'm doing is generating some ideas for feature enhancements or improvements. Maybe my XY axis is low tech to high tech. I'm sorry, my X axis is low tech to high tech, and my Y axis is, let's say, in scope versus out of scope, right? Or primary versus secondary need, or alignment to our roadmap, or fast versus slow from an implementation standpoint. I love frameworks. I use frameworks in almost everything I do every day. Right now, they're like kind of built into my head, so I don't necessarily need to refer to them, but this is one of my favorite tools. Other frameworks might be think, feel, say, do, more, less, start, stop, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And there's a bunch of ideas here for you.
We have a question from Rupi who says, "This is great research snacks. Products have commented that design and research don't share. Trying to share early and often is hard if you're solo. Any tips for small teams, like 1 or 2 designers?"
It sounds like maybe the culture you're working in isn't that UX mature yet. I would continue to share early and continue to share often. Especially with your core team that's most invested in the research, right? Those are your stakeholders. At the end of the day, nobody can say you asked the wrong people the wrong questions in the wrong way if you included them at every step, right? And in order for you to be successful as a researcher, you need your stakeholders' buy-in, right? You need to establish that trust and that credibility. And the best way, the most successful way, the most reliable way to do that is to build that relationship. UX is absolutely a team sport. If you're not finding that cultural awareness and you don't think that you can change it in your current organization, I would encourage you to ask yourself whether this is the type of organization that's a good fit for you right now.
Always a good question. I had a question that I wrote down. Something that's not easy for lots of people are trying to notice those faces people make, their body language, tones of voice, or vocal stress. Where can people learn more about what those things look like and how to look for them?
Sure. Well, if we're talking about, I can give you some quick tips now. If we're talking about like Zoom interviews, there are certain things that I look for. So for example, when somebody smiles, I want to see like the lines in their eyes, right? I don't like if they're smiling like a half bullshit smile, they're probably not going to have like the crow's feet, right? No matter how old we are, you have like some sort of, scritch. That means it's a real smile versus like a bullshit smile. Another thing is how close they're sitting to the Zoom screen, right? So this is a pretty good distance. If I was conducting a study with you, Debbie, at this point, I would probably ask you to come closer to the camera so I really could like zoom in on your facial expressions.
Yeah, that's hard because the setup of my desk, I've got like a 50-inch television and a standing desk, and then I'm a good 3 feet away.
Yeah, and sometimes it won't be possible. Sometimes I might ask your lighting is pretty good. Sometimes people, it'll be at night, people will be dark, and I'm going to set up the lighting as well. Also, like it's kind of hard to see in Zoom, but like, do they have folded arms, right? Are they, what is their body position? Are they twirling their hair a lot? Are they, tapping? This one drives me nuts, right? Like people like constant tappers or
That's
constant.
my boyfriend.
Constant shakers. When people raise their eyebrows, right? That's like a telltale sign that's like, or oh my God, that's kind of a telltale sign. We go through a whole series of exercises about body language in our interview workshop to help you prepare for that. I don't know of any sort of off the shelf or like documented resource about reading body language. I do use the first, warm-up period of my sessions to assess how quickly my participant thinks, feels, articulates these things, how comfortable they are with the subject matter. And I will be sussing out these things in order to, kind of help make sure that I get out of the session what we're looking to accomplish.
Great. Thanks. Amit from LinkedIn says, "I just checked out the Curiosity Tank website. I'm loving the resources. That's my weekend reading and viewing sorted. Even signed up for your monthly musings."
Oh, awesome. We do have a terrific newsletter. It's called Fuel Your Curiosity. Have about 5,000 people subscribed and an outstanding open rate of 46%.
Nice.
Very, very proud of that. And
a good vanity metric.
a very good metric. And tons of resources, and we're adding resources every every month we continue to add new ones. So yeah, please check it out
Please
and
do.
join us.
Yeah, and if there are other questions, please ask them. We actually have Michele here live, and you're all deer in headlights, just like, come on, throw the questions at her. We've got her
Give me
here,
the
and I'm
tough one.
checking. Yeah, grumpy questions. I'm checking for our next adventure together. It's not next week. I think it's the week after. Here we go. On Wednesday, the 26th, you're going to be our guest, and I will have figured this out by then. You're going to be doing a show on research ops.
Yes. Also leverage from our Orchestrate workshop. Research ops is really not only a growing need, but a growing discipline, and can be a great way to break into the industry if you are super organized. So we'll talk about research ops, how to identify when you need it, and
Cool. Yeah, that's going to be one of our regular podcast episodes. So that's going to go out to our audio only. This one's going to be in the micro lessons playlist on YouTube after it's all done. YouTube doesn't let me edit videos, so it will start with me being completely confused about whether or not we were streaming. So that's just the reality of it. But that is when we have planned to have you back. I know we'll have you back again. Guys, last chance for questions. We normally wind up in the coming minutes. Michele, were there any other notes or points you wanted to make?
I would just really like to reinforce that if you are newer to conducting user research, please do not attempt to take notes while you're conducting your sessions. You'll likely miss important physical cues, key body language, and definitely sacrifice rapport and eye contact. And you'll also likely introduce selection bias simply by choosing what you take notes on and what you don't. And that is really, really critical, especially as you're trying to build your own reputation and gain credibility for your team. Instead, please be 100% present and either have your sessions transcribed or take notes after the fact. And ideally, what you want to do is look at the video version so you can also be taking notes on the non-verbal aspects of what your participant is communicating. And when you get to the point where you're ready to try some frameworks, choose a framework that's the right size and to right size the amount of information that you're actually documenting and the data that you are collecting to expedite the analysis and synthesis. And remember that there's many, many ways to take notes. You don't always have to take notes chronologically. You can take notes by topic, you could take notes by depth, you could take notes by time, and so forth. There are so many fun ways to do that. And once you get good at it, you'll never go back. It's life-changing.
Cool, thanks. We do have a question in the chat room. It's not completely about taking notes, but I hope you don't mind a little sideways question here. Amit says, being new to UX, coming up to 2 years experience from an IT background, I love research. I mostly apply to UX designer roles, but I see some interesting research roles out there. What advice would you give to someone who wants to try getting into UX research from a design background?
So I come from a design background, and I can identify with this a lot. I would try to get as much research experience as possible and work with someone who has at least 7 years of experience conducting research in the field. What happens, I see a lot of people, take on projects, and volunteering is great. The challenge that often happens with the volunteer projects is you don't have a mentor, and or your mentor really isn't a seasoned user researcher, and you learn and pick up kind of bad habits. And then you wind up coming to someone like me down the road to fix those habits. So if you can find a mentor or find a program like the Ask Like a Pro series, where you can practice and get feedback and have your question answered along the way. And I would say that's not any different if you're coming from a design background versus a psychology or anthropology background or customer service or or hairstyling. That would be my same feedback.
Great, thank you. Um, ah, Udipta says, I didn't really get the framework bit. How is it related to note taking, or did I miss something? I think you were here the whole time. I don't think you missed something. Maybe you can just define framework in case people aren't too sure what that is.
Sure. So a framework in this instance is defining a certain range of categories in which we want to populate our learnings, right? So maybe we want to organize our learnings in terms of what did the participant find easy versus did the participant find difficult, and that framework is easy to difficult, right? Or maybe the one of the frameworks that we want to understand is according to a spectrum of whether something was like incredibly emotional or whether it's incredibly tactical in terms of their needs or desires or their pain points, right? So that's across a sentiment spectrum. So we can use frameworks to help us organize our thoughts in both debrief grids, as well as note-taking templates, as well as analysis and synthesis. Is that helpful?
All right. I hope so. Udipta, how was that? Did that make more sense? Hopefully. We'll see. The stream's usually delayed by 20 to 40 seconds, so we will know soon.
Okay.
It is not completely live. We don't have that yet. He says, got it. Thanks. And lots of thanks from Amit for answering his question. Said, brilliant. Thank you. I've made loads of notes throughout the chat. So I guess if we don't see any other questions, maybe we'll wind up for today, only because I know we'll see you in 2 weeks, to try this all again. And I guess I'll have you back in Zoom, but I'll try to work it out so that maybe I'm in vMix and I can set off my stupid things over in my little box over here. So, wow, Michele, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being so patient and understanding with the technical difficulties I had at the beginning of the show. You're such a trooper about that stuff. And again, you have to be, I guess, with being on Zoom for research and stuff all the time, everything goes wrong. So give everybody some parting words, and please remind us where we can find you and stalk you.
Awesome. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, Michele, 1L in Michele. Ronsen is my last name, Ronsen. And please join me on curiositytank.com. Sign up for the newsletter, the free newsletter called Fuel Your Curiosity. And there are dozens of resources on the resource page. And I can't wait to hear more about you. If you have feedback, if you have questions, let me know.
Excellent, excellent. So unfortunately, since we are not in my usual broadcast software, I cannot now switch us to the goodbye song and waving and the usual things. I'm just going to have to click stop streaming, and it's going to end with a thud. So thanks again to everybody putting up with what we've got today. I'm going to click stop stream. Michele, thank you so much. Everybody be safe, and I will see everybody tomorrow for Reaction Stream. Have a good day.